if this comes out, we know 9/11 is an inside job, but if it comes out, it'll bring down the whole government. And we want the Western governments to do good. We believe in radical egalitarian socialism, so we on the controlled left are not going to expose this. They were honest. But see, once you say too big to fail, we're going to skip this network break to give our guests more time. Once you go along with the idea that we can't expose evil because it'll bring us all down, you've just signed on to the very worst elements. They will become the new norm. And that's how tyranny accelerates. To the point now that the corruption has reached, I mean, Obama is a dictator now. He was elected, but he acts as a dictatorial despot, a totalitarian. That's all the constitutional lawyers. That's the former head of the NSA directorate saying we're under a total takeover of totalitarianism. I mean, that's what it is. And now they want to start arresting people for their speech and throwing them in loony bins. They're like, well, why are you still on air? Because I'm one of the biggest, loudest mouths. And they won't go after me until they really drop the hammer. But believe me, they're going after my name and trying to assassinate my character and trying to set me up all the time. More than 50 times I was approached in grocery stores and at DVD signings and at bookstores by feds saying, hey, Alex, you want to blow up stuff together today? You want to attack the State Department and kill Hillary Clinton? And I'm just sitting there going, you're like a 6'5", what are you, a Marine attached to diplomatic services? And then they totally freaked out because I could just tell by who they were, and I knew who ran security for Bilderberg, and they all freaked out and ran off. I mean, they've got 6'4" Marines that look like they could unscrew your head, folks, trying to set me up, okay? I mean, I think I was like 45 years old. That's how evil this government is. How could you get someone to work against their own countrymen that they know are patriots? Joe Bannister faced prison twice for his speech. It was publicized nationwide, his trial, but not when he was found not guilty twice. They tried to put him in prison for decades for simply speaking about the IRS being a fraud. And now, I take you to this piece of news. Walter Scott shooting. Why you must always question the official story. The cop 2 days ago gets caught shooting the black man 7 or 8 times. He fired 8 shots. I think 7 hit him. They're debating the numbers that hit. In Charleston, North Carolina, South Carolina. A video emerged showing North Charleston, South Carolina police officer Michael T. Slager shooting Scott in the back 5 times. Fired 8 shots total. Kind of babbling through that without a teleprompter. And here's the big issue. You totally believed him, media, and Kit Daniels has an article about this, until the video came out, and then the media questioned it. It's normal to question anybody. It's not a conspiracy theory or taboo or wrong to question individuals, government, corporations, you name it, especially when they have a history of lying. And this guy clearly did. But if you know that some police departments frame people, as he got caught trying to do with that taser, dropping the taser on him, then how do you believe the Tsarnaev brothers carried out the Boston bombing when the older brother worked for the CIA on record? Russia blew his cover. He didn't kill a cop like they said. He was gunned down and run over in front of everybody. They tried to kill the other brother, then cut his throat out to keep him quiet. He said he was not guilty. His lawyer then came out and said, oh, he is guilty right before the jury, and now he faces the death penalty in sentencing. I take you now to Joe Bannister joining us, and his website is agentfortruth.com. It's an excellent website. He's also an author. But just looking at this, I have the New York Times here that we'll put on screen because I can't find it, admitting the IRS takes tens of thousands of people's businesses and accounts with no proof of fraud. And even the New York Times admits it. They have congressional hearings. Law lets IRS seize accounts on suspicion. No crime required. And then Joe Bannister speaks out against this, and they try to put him in prison. This is a totalitarian move. But how can you believe anything the system says when the DEA for decades has been recording and tracking basically every phone call and lying about it? Joe Bannister, thanks for coming on. I kind of set the table there with a background of this persecution, and now Lois Lerner, the DOJ, says no contempt charges for former IRS official Lois Lerner, she gets to persecute tens of thousands of people, wrecking their lives, causing suicides, imprisoning people. These are the type of folks that came after you. They're allowed to commit their crimes out in the open, Joe Bannister. What do you make of that?
Well, thanks for having me on, Alex. It's been a while, huh? 16 years since we met in that Chinese restaurant in Fremont, California, when you were doing the police state investigation. The hole is very deep. You're right. I mean, I was tired of it a long time ago, as were you, where heads never roll. Lois Lerner, I mean, right at the tip top, of course, Obama and the commissioner of the IRS would be above her, and they're ultimately allowing this to go on. But even someone like Lerner and all of the underlings that she was ordering around, no heads roll. They get their retirements, they get their pensions, their paychecks.
I want to know how they themselves can persecute even mainline pro-life and libertarian groups and try to put people in prison or deny their 501c3. I mean, they're just such conscious persecutors. They're such conscious crooks.
Well, I mean, brimming with evil. And again, all I can do, and you do so well, and so much wider than me, is to try to continue to bang the drum and get the American people in much greater numbers to be sick and tired of being treated like chumps. And you remind people of this so frequently, and well,
let's go back and talk about, just briefly before we look at the current crimes and where you see the world going, because you're a smart guy. I want to get your take on this. You have a lot of family that's in law enforcement. I want to get, basically what they're saying now, because you told me previously they used to think you were wrong. Now they're, you've said, are pretty freaked out as well. And that's the same thing I get from other folks that I know as well that are in the enforcement system. They now are having that moment of truth, like the military, realizing how real all this really is. The denial's over. Now is the moment of truth. But describe for folks what they tried to do to you for simply speaking out about what they were doing.
Well, in a nutshell, Alex, I had some clients after I left the IRS, and frankly, the clients dragged me into dealing with the IRS on their behalf. And I really wanted nothing to do with the IRS, but a particular client wanted to sue the IRS to get his tax money back. So he had already paid the IRS the money. The IRS lays out instructions, procedures to follow if you want to get your money back. And so the client asked me to help him dot all the I's and cross all the T's to make sure that he followed the rules to just try to get his money back. Now, of course, the IRS, there's a civil process that goes on as you try to do that. And the IRS can simply say no, and then you appeal to higher and higher levels. And that's the way it's supposed to work. That's the way their manuals say it's supposed to work. That's the way the courts say it's supposed to work. But what the IRS did is they turned that process, the client trying to seek a refund and using a CPA to help him follow the instructions, they turned that into a criminal activity whereby we were fraudulently seeking a refund. And it's very typical that the IRS will do this to people. They'll pull out the criminal prosecution card, the specter of you being a criminal, in order to silence and discredit you. And unfortunately, there's a fortunate and unfortunate part about this. You have to be charged criminally in order for you to get a jury of your peers to actually evaluate your conduct. Most of what the IRS does, they do civilly, and there's no jury involved, rarely a judge involved, and so they can unilaterally do all the evil that they do. But when you're charged criminally, you still have an opportunity for a jury trial. And I had a jury trial in Sacramento, California. We were a little concerned because the majority of the jury pool came from government service. Sacramento, California is the capital of California, brimming with government bureaucrats. And we had quite a few government servants on the jury, and yet they were the ones that were the most awake. So you never know how you're going to be surprised. And so June of 2005, fighting 4 felony counts that would have sent me to Club Fed for quite a few years, I was acquitted of all the charges, and deservedly so, because the jury saw the most ridiculous allegations. And then when we got to trial, the government had no case. A couple of the jurors told me after the trial, they said, well, Joe, every time the government brought something up, it actually made you look better. Aren't they supposed to bring up stuff that makes you look bad? And I said, well, you know, I didn't have anything that made me look bad, and they couldn't even manufacture anything.
But then they came after you again.
Right. There were immediately after my acquittal, they started this 6.5-year civil investigation. And of course, most of the civil investigations that they do are really just veiled criminal investigations where they gather up as much information as they can on someone and look for any possible angle to prosecute them criminally. So, yeah, it's been ongoing. I resigned to the fact. I resigned in 1999 from the IRS, but resigned to the fact at that point that I'd probably be dancing with the IRS for the rest of my life. So I'm kind of, getting what I already expected, and thankfully I'm still very appreciative of the rights that do remain that we can still take advantage of.
Well, sure, a lot of people will say, this sounds scary, I better submit to them, but they go after people that go along with the system. Then meanwhile, upwards of half of Congress doesn't pay taxes or owes taxes, mainly Democrats. They then don't get in trouble. Al Sharpton can owe millions of dollars, never pay it. All the big billionaires have the laws written in the special accounting firms. And I've had the CPAs and top lawyers tell me, Alex, you're not an insider. You're not allowed to have these tax exemptions and these, the Irish shuffle and all these other things they do that are legal. But the way the IRS interprets it, I can't do it with a little bit of money. But if you've got billions and you're part of the establishment, then you can. And that's what's so frustrating. I'm sure you saw the New York Times article and the congressional hearings a few months ago where they just admitted, okay, the IRS does take innocent people's money. They know they're innocent. Old ladies that deposit, from their small diners, $600, $700 a day, pay taxes on it. They now call that criminal, even though it's not criminal, and take everything the old ladies got. I mean, this is just wild. And then now we see asset forfeiture seizure through the feds and local police expanding. I mean, it's getting so naked. Is it getting worse, or are we just more aware of it now?
I think both. Frankly, in the 80s is when all the money laundering laws, the structuring laws, it all became, had a lot more power and teeth. It was actually in the 80s that the IRS special agents were enabled to carry their firearms 24/7. It used to be, prior to the 80s, that they'd have to check their gun out of a safe. They rarely would actually carry their gun with them. So the money laundering laws, these structuring laws, all these laws that are tripping up the average American, this is something you speak about so frequently, problem, reaction, solution. They tell the public that, oh, we have to go after these drug dealers and get all these money laundering laws. And sure, they could choke up the money launderers and the drug dealers if they wanted to.
But they don't.
But they actually want to use these measures to spy on the American people. And the financial spying was some of the, the earliest spying that they did. I mean, the structuring laws come from the Bank Secrecy Act, right, of 1970. So the planning occurs many decades ahead of time, and sadly, we collectively as Americans, we keep getting boondoggled that the target of this is really these bad drug dealers. And I found when I was doing my investigations in the IRS that, wow, why is it that all these bad drug dealers, we may pick off 1 out of 1,000, but meanwhile, millions of Americans, every cash transaction that they do is being monitored.
Well, sure, you've seen the regulations change where they've gotten rid of most of the white-collar armed investigators like you that go after corrupt billionaires, and the headlines are, more IRS investigators target blue-collar. I mean, they'll do some $50,000 investigation over $1,000 of some blue-collar guy that can barely pay his bills because they don't want the investigators going after the real criminals. They want them going after the general public. Joe Bannister, a true American hero, is our guest. We're going to take your phone calls on the waterfront. He can talk about any subject. Michael, Joseph, Jason, Aaron, Dylan, John. We'll get to all of you. I'm Alex Jones. Stay with us. But how far will this tyranny go? Now an open political weapon.
We're on the march.